Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a source that looks at the hijab, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. We're exploring it not just as fabric, but as a whole concept with its own logic, its own stated benefits, and, believe it or not, some surprising parallels to a business suit.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start by looking beyond the actual fabric. Then we'll get into the logic behind the coverage. After that, we'll see how it's framed as both a shield and a symbol. Make that really interesting comparison to a business suit, and then wrap it all up with the core idea, being valued for the mind.
Okay, first up, beyond the fabric. The source we're looking at kicks things off by saying, to really get what hijab is about, you have to look past the cloth itself and understand the bigger picture. And really, the whole idea kind of boils down to this one big question. Can the clothes we choose to wear actually change how people see us? Can it shift the focus from what we look like to who we are? So right off the bat, the source makes it clear that hijab isn't just one thing. It has this dual meaning. Yeah, there's the physical covering, but there's also this wider principle of modesty in your behavior, in your speech. The idea is that these two sides of the coin are meant to work together. Now, focusing on that physical side for a second, the source actually puts a number on the level of body coverage it involves. And it's a pretty striking one, around 80 to 90%.
So you might be asking, what does that 80 to 90% actually mean in practice? Well, according to the text, it typically covers the hair, neck, and chest, and it's also about concealing the general contours of the body. But importantly, the face and hands are left visible, which, is pretty crucial for being able to identify people and just interact in society.
Okay, so that covers the what. But what about the why? That brings us to section 2, where the source gets into the actual logic behind this specific level of coverage. At the heart of the social logic presented here is this idea that a woman's physical beauty is considered something special, something really intimate, meant primarily for her spouse. The argument follows that displaying it more widely in public could invite the wrong kind of attention and, well, just complicate social interactions. And this is where the source does something really interesting. It builds a bridge to an idea that might feel a lot more familiar in the West. It compares the idea of reserving one's beauty for a spouse to the value we place on keeping certain intimate moments private, just for a partner. It suggests there's a shared logic there about reserving something special. And to back this up, the source brings in another specific number. It points to studies on attraction, which suggest that about 20 to 40% of the body, we're talking about areas like the chest and hips, are often the primary focus of sexualization. So the thinking here is that by specifically covering those areas, the hijab acts as a kind of buffer. It's said to help women navigate the world without constantly feeling like they're being judged on their appearance, freeing them from that feeling of self-objectification. And that whole idea of protection is a perfect lead-in to our third section, a shield and a symbol. This is where we're going to dig into the specific benefits that the source says come with wearing the hijab. This quote from the source is just, wow. It's so powerful because it completely flips the common narrative of restriction on its head. This woman frames the hijab not as something that confines her, but as a tool that gives her freedom. The freedom to just be herself, without feeling the pressure of society's expectations about how she should look. The source then kind of bundles the reported benefits into a few key areas, citing different research. Psychologically, it talks about women feeling more confident and having less anxiety about their appearance. And socially, it points to claims of less public harassment and a much stronger connection to their culture and faith. And to really help us get a handle on this idea of identity, the source gives us another great comparison. Think about a Japanese kimono, or really any traditional cultural clothing. It's a powerful way to express your heritage and pride. The source presents the hijab in a similar light, as a clear symbol of faith and a connection to a huge global community. All right, now we're getting to section 4. And honestly, this is where the argument takes an absolutely fascinating turn. The source starts connecting the dots between the principles of hijab and the professional dress codes that many of us see every single day. The big idea here is that these two very different types of clothing, well, they might actually be trying to do the exact same thing. And what's that? To shift the focus away from how a person looks and onto their mind, their ideas, their professional self. And this is where it gets incredibly specific. Just look at this table. The source lines up the Islamic hijab right next to an academic gown from Oxford and a formal suit at Harvard.
And check it out. Not only are the stated goals almost identical, create a respectful environment, keep focus on content, but the approximate body coverage is, well, it's shockingly similar. And this bar chart just makes it crystal clear, right? It visually drives that point home. When you see the numbers for formal attire at places like Harvard, Oxford, and the Sorbonne all laid out, it puts that 80 to 90% figure for hijab into a completely new perspective.
So, with that pretty surprising comparison in mind, let's move to our final section and pull all these ideas together to really understand that core argument, being valued for the mind.
So, let's do a quick recap of the source's main points. First, hijab is presented as more than just clothing. It's a whole approach, both inside and out. Second, its purpose is to protect from objectification and, in turn, boost confidence. And third, and this is the big one, it actually shares a core function with professional wear, to make sure that people are judged for what's in their head, not for how they look. And to really tie this all together, the source leaves us with one last brilliant analogy. Just think about a doctor's white coat. The second you see it, you're not thinking about their outfit, you're thinking about their expertise. The source argues that the hijab is meant to work in the exact same way, as a signal that tells you to focus on the person's character and their intellect. And so we'll leave you with that final question from the source material. It's a thought that really goes beyond any single piece of clothing, and it asks all of us to think about the role our clothes, all of our clothes, play in how we see and value each other every single day. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.